Nifemi Oguntoye. U.S. President Donald Trump has kicked off his first overseas visit of his second term, landing in Saudi Arabia to a full state welcome and major business deals in the making. The former president is looking to deepen ties with Riyadh with billions in investment and arms sales on the table. We have more in this report.
Lavender carpets, military salutes and the royal welcome. President Trump was greeted personally at the steps of Air Force One by Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, a pointed contrast to President Biden's cooler reception in 2022. At the heart of this high-profile visit, massive investment deals and a renewed strategic partnership. President Trump, who called MBS a friend, says the two have built a strong personal relationship. Inside the palace, the American delegation, including CEOs from Amazon, Boeing, IBM, and Openai, share a lavish Saudi lunch with their hosts. Topics: everything ranging from AI and energy to aerospace and arms, reportedly including a $100 billion weapon package. The visit is also symbolic. Saudi media are hailing it as a sign of Riyadh's growing global clout. And unlike President Trump's 2017 visit, analysts say this time the Saudis are negotiating as equal partners. Later today, President Trump will headline a U.S.-Saudi investment forum, hoping to boost American jobs and secure more Gulf capital, key goals of his America First agenda. President Trump's four-day Middle East tour includes stops in Qatar and the UAE, but notably, not Israel. A shift that's raising questions about the administration's regional strategy as the war in Gaza continues.
And President Trump says there could be what he called an earth-shattering announcement before this trip ends. What does that mean? Or really what that means is still quite unclear, but we're following every development. Let's bring in global affairs analyst Koul for more on the significance of this visit. Mr. Follower, thank you for joining us on The World Now. Trump is meeting Saudi leaders just weeks after pausing U.S. and LNG exports, talking about a focus on energy security. Is this visit primarily about securing Saudi oil commitments to stabilize global markets? Or you think there's a broader geopolitical play at work here, especially countering China's influence in the region?
Thanks for having me. So this is very complicated. Complicated in the sense that a lot of Democrats are pointing out that this could be a potential conflict of interest, and rightfully so, to argue that, because if you look at the Gulf area and Saudi Arabia, for example, and some other parts of that region, you would see that President Trump has a huge investment portfolio in that area. We're looking at billions of dollars worth of penthouses. We're looking at potential cryptocurrency business and some other golf courses and expensive hotels, and that's what what American known him. I've grown to know him for a savvy businessman. But as that may be controversial for now, it seems that the White House are saying that there's nothing to be worried about as far as conflict of interest is concerned. The president is interested in forging new alliances, particularly looking at international global affairs and the instability across the globe. Mr. Trump and his government are trying to wager some new accord, And we'll just have to figure out how this pans out eventually, because there's a lot of personalities involved, there's a lot of money involved, and most especially the world peace is at stake.
I'm wondering just how far this alliance will go, because the Biden administration, for instance, pushed for Saudi-Israel normalization, but talks stalled over Gaza and nuclear demands. Do you think Trump's presence suggests a revival of that deal? And what concessions do you think Riyadh might be demanding in exchange?
There's a lot of concessions, and definitely one would be security and multilateral corporations among both countries. And not only that, um, um, Saudi Arabia, for example, have been looking for the most part to normalize relationship with Israel, and that has been top of the mind for the previous administration, Biden administration, which unsuccessfully was, unfortunately was not actualized. But this time, um, bearing in mind that President Trump has some stake in those regions, and also he is personal friends with top leaders in that region. So it makes it very interesting, because we're looking at um, the possibility of uniting all those fronts together. Israel, particularly, are still at the whims and caprices of the United States, and they're still like the number one country that supplies arms and ammunition to Israel for them to continue to fight the war. So yes, there's a lot of leverage here, and Mr. Trump, as is normal thing to do, he would leverage on that, and this is part of things that we're looking out for, how this will pan out eventually, because there seems to be a lot of things on the table, and normalization or relationship between Saudi Arabia and Israel is just part of it.
Remember how Mr. Trump famously bragged about protecting Saudi leaders after Jamal Khashoggi's murder? With the U.S. still supplying arms to Riyadh, do you see his visit undermining pressure for reforms, or is human rights now irrelevant in U.S.-Saudi relations?
Well, that's another interesting angle to it. The United Nations, for example, and some other bodies, human rights bodies, because of the policies and so many of the Trump's agenda that's been inundated in public space, it's very kind of hard to pinpoint and identify or pursue um, any topic or any particular subject matter at this point, because there's so many things flying over the space and begging for attention. So that unfortunately might be back at the burner. That's not like the major concerns of a lot of, for example, United Nations, for instance. So, and this is part of where we talk about conflict of interest. I would also say that the United States Constitution does exempt the president and the vice president of the United States from conflict of interest clause. However, it is important that before a United States president or vice president gets some form of gift from a foreign body or a foreign country, there has to be a consent from Congress. So everything is on the table. Americans are not really worried about things like that. They're just worried about, what he is able to do for the people of America generally. So altogether, we're just looking at the possibility of striking a a good deal, not only domestically and also internationally, and that's where we are right now.
Trump is now anticipating making a big announcement before the end of this trip. His optimism about ending the Ukraine war isn't quite happening as fast as he anticipated it. What do you feel about his optimism about that big announcement? How well would you say is faring, with international relations, especially with his tough stance on, tariff and what have you?
It's very complicated. It's a murky waters that we're threading in, and I remember, a lot of people do remember that when the president came in, he said, first day one, I'm going to squash this beef. I'm going to clear out the war, and this is going to happen like a, like a whim. But unfortunately, that's not happening. That's not how international politics run. But that's not to say he's not making some stringent efforts. There and first of its kind, we hear now that President Zelensky and President Putin there are potential talks of them meeting together somewhere somewhere in Europe and out of the spheres of um, you know public glare, and that's very interesting. And if this pans out, and also the president, I'm talking about President Trump, has also um, promised that or indicated that he would like to join that conversation to find a lasting solution to those crises and that war in that region. So yes, it might be a little slow, but to his credit, is doing all that he can to, because he gets a huge credit for it if he happens to do it. The previous administration was not able to achieve that, so this will be a policy goal and a policy success if he's able to mediate and find and help or assist in finding a lasting peace to the war between Ukraine and Russia.
Global Affairs Analyst Koul, thank you for talking to us on The World Now.
Thank you for having me. Thank you.